Hello, this is Truman, and we continue our lessons in personal evangelism. Today's lesson, we look at Ephesians 6:12. And there God tells us that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but we wrestle against principalities and powers and the rulers of the darkness of this world. We must not be naive when we begin to present the gospel that Satan will not oppose us. We have the good news that the gospel is the power of God unto salvation to everyone who believes. We have the assurance that the Holy Spirit takes the message of Christ and confirms it in hearts. But when God begins to deal with someone we're sharing Jesus with, you'll often see a spiritual dynamic that is hard to explain. So I want to share some stories to that end. I was sharing with a couple that had visited our church in Portland. And I went to the home and I was visiting downstairs with the man. And as I shared my testimony, he could identify with it. I began to share the gospel and he was open to the gospel. And as we continue to share the gospel, it seems like that his heart was beginning to be receptive. Then a strange thing happened. His son came downstairs, a young boy, and he says this, "Mom said that preacher needs to go home." Well, I was somewhat embarrassed. We had been persuading with the gospel now for maybe an hour and a half, and it was getting late. And so I looked at my watch and I apologized and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry that I've stayed so long." And he really wanted me to stay, but he accepted that I needed to go. And so I left. And as I left, I continued to pray. But I got a phone call the next day or two, and that couple invited me to come back to the home. And so I did come back, and the gentleman did receive Christ, and God changed his life. But looking back now, after God had chosen that man and his family to have an impact not only on his community and his family, brothers and sisters, but also on the whole world. And this man God has used in a powerful way. And through his ministry and through his witness and through his investments, hundreds of thousands may have come to know Christ. And many ministries have been so blessed by his stewardship. Now, here's his story, the rest of his story. He said after I left, he went upstairs and he said to his wife, "Why did you send our son down to tell the preacher to go home?" His wife said, "I didn't do that. I would never do that." And then he went into the bedroom and said to his son, "Why did you come downstairs and tell the preacher to leave? That your mom said it's time for the preacher to go home." And his son basically, I don't know anything about that. Now, looking back on that, now there's a spiritual dynamic here that we both look at over many years of walking with Jesus. And it seemed like that as Christ was being shared and he was getting close to giving his heart to Jesus, there was a wrestling match. There was a spiritual battle going on between God and between the forces of evil. And here, this battle was real. So in your witness, don't be surprised if there's interruptions and obstacles and hindrances and even persecution to keep you from sharing Jesus, because God has that lost sheep that's going to make an impact on the world. And those that are going to make an impact on the world, Satan holds on very tightly not to lose them. Just think of the Apostle Paul and how tightly Satan held on to him and the impact he made on the world. So don't give up because of opposition. And remember, we've got to pray and we've got to bind the enemy in our witness. Thank you.